Okay, welcome back to our, I think, third and final episode of the podcast. Today we're going to be covering quite a few things today. We got cyber attacks, wireless and mobile device attacks, and application attacks. So we're just gonna,
Yay!
yeah, we're just gonna hop right into the first one, which is denial of service attacks. So basically, how you describe denial of service attack, right, is exactly as it sounds. You're denying a user of a service, and that's usually done by hackers flooding a desired service's server with packets in an attempt to overload or flood the server, causing it to stop working or malfunction. Uh, so it's pretty straightforward. The victims themselves aren't their computers aren't generally harmed by it. It's more that them trying to access something, then they get harmed, right? Because let's say you're trying to do some online shopping, whatever, but you can't because the online store is being getting hit by a DOS attack, and so the store is down, right? Not much you can do then. It's more of an inconvenience than anything to you. But if you're the one who's running the server, then it's a pretty big inconvenience to say the least, because you're kind of getting dunked on. But they're not as dangerous as DDoS attacks, which you'll be getting into next. But yeah, basically it can cause servers to crash. Um, it can just deny people of a service, right? A lot of routers nowadays have sort of special firewall settings and things that will just drop packets suspected of being DOS and DDoS attacks, which is usually pretty useful. There's also if you're going to be hosting some sort of server, there is physical devices you can put in your in your network that will before your servers that detect DDoS and DOS attacks that just drop packets and just let everything else through. So you got those. You're good as gold, basically. You're pretty impervious to things. Obviously, there's always going to be some ways someone's going to get through, but for the everyday common hacker, you're going to be pretty all right. And I was sort of floating around this thing called DDoS attacks, right? It's pretty similar to DOS attacks. These
That's what
are
all the 12-year olds say on Xbox Live.
yeah, I'm gonna DDoS you. DDoS stands for distributed denial of service. It's very similar to a DOS attack, except instead of using one system where DOS attack is only from one computer, DDoS attacks are spread across a large amount of systems, with all the packets flooding in, kind of thing. So it's basically really hard to track down where it's coming from. How they do this, right, is through something called botnet, which I'll explain in a sec. But again, users generally aren't harmed by DDoS attacks. It's mainly large services. Mainly, all it does is disrupt someone's ability to access the service. Really. Uh,
Put in a more brutal way.
so yeah, there's
Just more efficiently, yeah.
I think there's a somewhat recent one. It was called the DDoS attack. It was measured at something was it? I think it says 1.3 terabytes a second onto this poor server.
Jesus!
Yeah,
What
for those
the
of you
hell?
who don't know,
Oh, sorry,
uh,
language.
DIN is one of the primary sort of servers and overseers of the DNS servers in most of the internet infrastructure for North America and Europe. So
Oh,
I mean,
so they gotta be able to process a lot.
yeah, but I don't know if 1.3 terabytes a second is too much for it. I didn't look into that, but they pretty much got slammed by 1.3 terabytes a second of a DDoS attack, effectively shutting down part of their DNS servers. So people had to either type in the IP for their website or not go to the website. Yeah, again, there's special firewalls and things you can put in your actual network, physical devices that can stop these kind of attacks. Like I said, there is a limit to them because 1.3 terabytes is still a lot of data, and I don't know if we'll be able to stop all of that. Best thing to do in that case is just unplug the servers.
Yeah.
If the packets can't get to the servers because their servers aren't connected, then you can't damage. Technically the hackers still sort of achieve their goal of taking down the service, but then no devices are harmed trying to process everything. But DDoS attacks are done through the use of something that's called a botnet. Botnets are basically a large amount of computers all interconnected by a virus, and each individual computer can be running one or more bots. Sometimes they can be doing multiple programs at once too. Usually for things like DDoS attacks, email spamming, stuff like that. Sometimes mining cryptocurrency. So botnets are usually created and spread through the use of worms or just general viruses. So, again, we talked about worms in I think the first episode. Your computer gets infected, all the other computers on the network can get infected through this worm, and then they're all part of like the botnet or any just general virus, right? Basically, if your computer gets infected, you can become part of a botnet. Botnets can like seriously slow down your computers too, because they're gonna be running multiple processes, right? Because they're gonna be constantly pinging, uh, like a server of some sort for a DDoS attack. Then that would slow down your network like crazy. But if they're doing things like mining cryptocurrency, then your computer itself would start to slow down like crazy because it's really heavy on computers, especially graphics cards. If you're running your 5-year-old laptop that doesn't have a real graphics card other than an integrated one in their CPU, it's probably going to cause the thing to blue screen. So
At the minimum.
at the
You might
minimum,
get yeah,
yeah,
you might get something worse like parts overheating and possibly even frying at that point.
yeah. So the virus can be spread across the internet and affect thousands, sometimes even millions of people, right? And they can use that to execute whatever they want. They can DDoS attack, like I said, mine cryptocurrency, email spams, whatever they want that involves like mass amounts of like computing power, really. Um, best way to sort of defend yourself a bit from being hit by like a or becoming part of a botnet, right? Be safe online. Don't get infected. We talked about this a lot in our first two episodes. Know what you're doing. Make sure everything's up to date. Antivirus, operating system. Make sure those are all up to date. That way, the virus can't get into your computer and make you part of the botnet and make you what's called a zombie, which is basically what individual computers in a botnet are called. They're just called zombies. Why? I don't know.
Was before it's like actually no, that doesn't really make sense.
I guess because
Like
like
that-
zombie like apocalypse and there's just a bunch of them, maybe.
yeah,
There's
maybe.
a
I
theory
feel like
behind
it'd be more accurate to call them like a minion
it. Gremlin.
because they just do whatever you
Or can we call him
want.
a bot?
Yeah.
A botnet.
There's a good
Yeah.
idea. All right,
So
so
yeah, basically all how it spread, like I was saying, was just like, basically becoming a zombie. Is just getting thrown into a botnet. There's not much to it really. It can just slow down your computers, crash them, or slow down your network. Being a zombie. That's the majority of how zombies work. And then one last thing before I hand this off to Ethan is something called packet sniffing. This one,
wow.
this one's a fancy schmancy one, but it actually has legitimate uses in well, like the quote unquote good guys side, if you will. So
Yeah,
packet sniffing is when a hacker or sometimes a cybersecurity specialist is connected to a network and they're running a program, something like Wireshark, with the goal to capture data being sent across the network in the form of packets. They then try to figure out either what's in the packet or who it's being sent to, depending on what they're trying to do. So basically, how it works, right, is it's capturing the packets being sent across the network, and it's reading them, seeing what's in them. For example, like a cybersecurity specialist would be using this to try to find like any errors in like their servers in terms of like communications, right? So let's say you're running a mail server, trying to see to make sure that the mail's going in and out properly. But if you're a hacker, you might be looking for packets that have like unencrypted passwords, banking information, the whatnot. So basically how you get affected by packet sniffing is usually connecting to public networks that aren't secured, um, because then the hacker has free range to just connect whenever they want, and anybody else connected is basically vulnerable to their packet sniffing. Uh, it's kind of a scary thing, you know. It can steal kinds of information. That's basically like I said before, packet sniffing just steals information, passwords, email addresses, banking information, basically all like the valuable things you'd ever see online.
wait, that's online.
Yeah, that's online. Um,
Oh,
well, you can,
banking information, all that
yeah,
jazz.
it's all
It's
online, like on a server somewhere.
of
Um,
course, I guess.
so yeah, basically how it works is a hacker could be connected to a public access point running a packet server program. Somebody else connected might be doing some online banking. Bad idea. Don't do that if it's public. Or logging into personal accounts. Also bad idea. Don't do that. The hacker can see these packets being sent and can attempt to decode them. Once decoded, the hacker has access to the passwords entered in any banking information. Now, obviously, they can't decode every single packet because a lot of them are encrypted. Like you need like some supercomputers sometimes to crack these things. But if it's things like, I believe FTP is a bad one for that. But I can't. Don't quote me on that one. But yeah, but basically, I think I've done it myself actually, where I've captured packets and seen like passwords in my network, and it was just fake passwords. It was just messages. Don't like, don't call the FBI on me. Yeah, but so basically, best way to not get affected by packet sniffing: don't connect to public networks, or well, like you can connect to them, but don't do anything that involves any personal information. So like, if you're at Starbucks, don't do your banking, don't send emails, don't log in anything. Just check your phone, check Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Eat eat your donuts or whatever you want in there. Drink your coffee. Don't do banking at Starbucks. That's the moral of the story, kids. Don't do banking at Starbucks.
Yeah, if you have something important that you need to do, go to the bank or something, or wherever you need to
Just
do
do it at
that
your
thing.
house, you
Yeah,
know.
or do it. Yeah, or do it at a safe location.
And if you have to, for whatever reason, use a VPN. Uh, because those can help you, like, help protect you against packet sniffing. They're not perfect.
I was so tempted there to break out into NordVPN rant.
Actually, things like NordVPN,
Yeah, NordVPN
there's
doesn't
another
it get
one.
like hacked
Yeah, they get
not too
hacked.
long ago?
Well, there's another one though, wasn't it? It's a popular
Mm.
one, like Virtual Shield. Is that one? No. Anyway, VPNs in general, pretty okay as long as they're trusted ones. I wouldn't go for the free one just in case, because they can also steal things. That's about it. I believe I'm handing it
All
over to you
right.
now, right? Yep.
Yeah, so I've got spoofing. This is a blanket term that encompasses everything like MAC address spoofing, IP spoofing, address resolution protocol spoofing, ARP spoofing, and domain name system server spoofing, DNS server spoofing. Just as the name implies, it's just like faking something. Anything really related to networking. Like information, like just information on on packets that are being sent over. So, definition: spoofing is a category that contains all sorts of cyber attacks related to impersonating another device through a variation of means. This includes, but is not limited to, everything that I've just mentioned. All right. All right. So, how does the user become affected by the threat, vulnerability, or attack? Although not really an attack, a user can get affected without them doing anything. The attacker who uses spoofing just has to change the information within the packet so that it appears that it was sent by another device. This includes, things like the IP address in the packet, or really just anything. So does it harm the user or the user systems? If used correctly, it won't necessarily harm the user systems, but instead could direct criminal acts towards the user. So it's less of an attack and more of a way to mislead authorities and other people of like not even really of high standing, but just others. It's supposed to like lead them to you instead of the attacker. So let's So, although it may sound evil, it can also be used for good. Applications such as HP Load Runner can be used to test servers and their ability to maintain traffic flow in a realistic fashion. This, of course, has to fabricate packets by itself, therefore using spoofing of different means. But yeah,
Fake packets.
yeah, exactly. Just fake packets. So, how does the user or cybersecurity specialist protect their system from this threat, vulnerability, or attack? Use ingress filtering. Block packets coming from outside the network with source addresses from inside the network. Yeah. So I personally don't know that much about ingress filtering.
Probably
It's just a quick
complicated.
Google search. Yeah, if you want to learn more about it, and you're serious about protecting against this type of thing, um, then I'd suggest searching it up.
So basically,
And
this is just
surprising,
like sort of verifying that packets that are coming into your network are the ones you're looking for. That's all it is.
yeah,
Very
basically,
basic explanation, but essentially what it is.
yeah. So then also don't rely on source IP addresses for authentication to a network. Like don't like double check double. Have a program in place that like what is it that I guess double checks if the like IP address or MAC address and things like that are all actually correct, and the ping or the packet is from the user that is specified in the packet. So moving on to wireless and mobile device attacks, we have rogue access points. So, what is a rogue access point? A rogue access point is a wireless access point that was installed without authorization from an administrator of said network. How does the user become affected? An unsecure router or switch is installed into your network by whomever without the admin knowing. That's all that really has to happen. How does it harm the user or the user system? It allows for easy entry into a system for unauthorized users. Who can then do whatever they want if they have the skills, of course. As an example, not really an example, but the way this works is an employee or an intruder attaches a new router to the system. This router is not authorized by the acting admin, and therefore knowledge about this router is little to none. It's not reported to the admin that this router is installed. This router is completely insecure and allows for easy access into the system. Now, until the router is discovered and taken care of, if you have an access, you have an access point for easy attacks into your network.
Seems pretty.
So how? Yeah, exactly. So how does a user or cybersecurity specialist protect their system from this threat, vulnerability, or attack? Hire only trusted employees. Hire smart employees.
Also, there's tools you can do to like scan all devices on a network, so you can do that regularly, so you can see if someone has put their own access point in, and that it isn't yours. So basically keep tabs on your network.
Yeah, that one too.
Yeah.
Do regular checks of your system. If you don't have something like Rory just mentioned, then go ahead and do it manually.
Yeah,
and have your employees report to you about any important changes to hardware or software.
Pretty fancy.
Yeah. So next, evil twin attacks.
Yeah.
So, evil twin attacks is an attack by means of a fraudulent router that records information from your device and sends it to the owner of said router.
Ooh, yucky.
I know, right?
Packet sniffing, but like with a router instead of a computer.
Yeah, it's like packet sniffing, but more like social engineering.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's just tricking people into thinking that it's a safe router when it's actually not, and then using that to packet sniff.
Double whammy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's let's see. How does the user become affected by the threat, vulnerability, or attack? If the user connects to the router, then it can start stealing info, just like any info that goes through it, or if it's what is it? They could also would they be able to download a virus through that actually?
If they're connected to the network.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they'd also be able to download different viruses and things like that. Like what is that? Like a keystroke
Keylogger?
like keylogger.
Yeah.
I think just different things like that. That doesn't harm the user system. Like most attacks, it just steals personal info like passwords or credentials. Still bad.
Yeah. Many bad.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So how this happens in real life. In the example of GRU, the Russian military agency, they would they would park vans full of equipment close to several different locations around North America with the purpose to steal data. They link to a website. The link to a website for describing this attack will be in the description. I will make sure to send that to you.
Freewifi.starbucks.com. No hack.
No hack, I swear. Free Roebuck guarantee.
Russian noise.
So, how does a user or cybersecurity specialist protect their system from this threat, vulnerability, or attack? I almost forgot that last part. Don't connect to Wi-Fi unless you're sure about it being secure. If it's like My Little Pony Superstar Horse 27, then you know it's probably fake. If you suddenly get disconnected from Wi-Fi, even though you had a strong connection, be wary and make sure you reconnect to the right one. What I mean by that is it's actually a common technique to have the proper Wi-Fi, like the proper router get like shut down.
Oh, so people don't connect to like only connect to
Yeah,
the bad
exactly. So
one.
so yeah, so they shut down the real one, and then they put up their fake one,
Ooh, that's risky.
so that people will connect to that one instead.
That's not good. That's like mega bad.
Yeah, I know, right? It really sucks. Yeah, so if you suddenly get disconnected, just like turn on your data or just like go.
Just leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if your internet goes down, don't connect to the internet again when it comes back up unless you know it's yours. Like if the name seems somewhat off.
Hmm.
I don't know. Not much else to it really.
All right, so
We're into
with
RF jamming, right?
yeah, we should be
That's
on to RF jamming.
that's me. RF jamming. So that's radio frequencies, right? The act of jamming radio
Ooh,
signals for signal communications in an attempt to be inconvenient or basically counter broadcasts kind of thing. By just creating random noise so to stop communications. This doesn't really generally affect the average everyday user unless you're like in your car with the radio or you're somebody who does sort of amateur radio, or I mean it makes sometimes if you work at like a radio station, people like might park their jamming van outside your building, right, and just sit there and block all communications outside of your building, basically being an inconvenience. There's not much harm that can really be done other than sort of it's almost like a DOS attack, but through radios instead of packets. Most
all
commonly,
right.
yes, it's pretty straightforward. Like I don't actually know how the jamming itself works. It's kind of complicated, but basically all it is it stops radio signals from leaving a location and reaching their target destinations.
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
that
like
sounds
so,
evil.
a very common like use of this was during like times of war, especially with the world wars. So both sides would be in the act of trying to attempt to jam communications between the enemy to sort of confuse and sort of shut down any form of attacks and or basically just stop communications so that they could get the upper hand in some sort of fight. That's all it was, right? Because if you can't sort of coordinate something and you're getting attacked from three different sides, there's not much you can do against that.
Hmm.
And there is like definitely techniques to sort of get around the radio frequency attacks. Sometimes it's things like changing the frequency you're on. Again, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on radio frequencies and radio communication, but for the average user, if you're being hit by like a RF jamming attack in like your car or something, just when you're at like a red light or a park kind of thing, open up your phone, just open up Spotify, you know, like if you want to listen to like music that bad, just open up Spotify. It's free, or any music you have really. If your radio is actively being jammed by somebody for some reason, just use a different alternative. Like there's plenty out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of it's there's not much to it really. So yeah, RF jamming attacks, radio frequency attacks is not much there's just really say about them. They're kind of an outdated thing now. I mean, I wouldn't say they're like fully outdated because we still use radios, things like obviously like walkie-talkies, but also like just for communication and like your radio in your car. But in terms of it being a real problem, I feel like that ship has kind of sailed. If you know what I'm saying, you know.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna hop right into something called blue snarfing. It's got a pretty funky name. Uh,
Wait. Oh, oh, that sounds like a Dr. Seuss character.
yeah, actually, you're right. Kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll make our own knockoff Dr. Seuss book revolving around blue snarfs.
Sweet.
Anyway, blue snarfing is the act of stealing information over Bluetooth. Things like contacts, calendars, emails, text, potentially images, due to things like AirDrop. If you have Apple, you know what AirDrop is, right? You gotta turn Bluetooth on for that. So blue snarfing is almost kind of like packet sniffing, but over Bluetooth, but not really. I don't know. It's more complex than that. So basically, how blue snarfing attacks work is generally it's vulnerabilities in manufacturer's code, or even sometimes, and if there is that vulnerability, then leaving your device discovered by other Bluetooth devices, is basically how you get hit by a blue snarfing attack. Again, like I said, you can have sort of emails leaked or the email content stolen, photos stolen, texts read, calendars read and changed for whatever reason. It's like a calendar. I mean, it's not a big deal, right? It's like, oh no, you're gonna see that I have to go to like someone's birthday party on like the 12th or something, right? I mean, obviously, if you're someone important and you need to be somewhere, and then someone's trying to thwart you, like it's a like action movie, right? They'll hack your Bluetooth or whatever, and they're gonna read your calendar, know you're trying to get to the airport on this day, and they're gonna try to stop you because this is an action movie. Um, that's that's one way to do it. I don't know. It's kind of best way to describe how it works. Really, is that as an example. So someone could be like just on their phone in public space. Like maybe we're at Starbucks again, like we were before. We get hit by a packet sniffing, or we get hit by blue sniffing and packet sniffing because it's a double whammy. And they just have their Bluetooth on, discoverable. Let's say they got like wireless earbuds. They're on the whole wireless earbud phase or trend, and they just left their device on to be discoverable as well. The attacker could be scanning the area for open Bluetooth channels and then begin their attack and start stealing information. Now, that's not saying that your device is always going to be like vulnerable to this. A lot of the time, vulnerabilities do get patched out in updates, but as with most things, there's always a way around it, right? Best way to sort of defend yourself against blue snarfing attack: turn off your Bluetooth. If there's no Bluetooth connection, there's no blue snarfing because they can't make the connection. It's kind of straightforward, kind of simple. Like I think for the wireless mobile device attacks and um, those ones are basically pretty straightforward. Turn off the access. Not much to it. I think we're doing WPA attacks now, right?
That is one evil Dr. Seuss character.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal your information through Bluetooth. I'm gonna have to make a rhyme for that. I'll put one in the description. I'll make up a rhyme.
All right, cool.
Yeah, but WPA attacks, right? They're basically trying to gain
Yes.
access to the router that is using WPA encryption through the use of capturing packets, figure out the encryption, then trying to use a brute force, so you're trying to figure out the password for the WPA encryption router. So it's only like people are only really affected by it after a user or the hacker gains access to the router because the brute force attack is done offline because it's attempt to just crack the password, not actually physically get into the device until they know the password. So once the password is figured out and the hacker is into the router, they can, capture packets. They can change settings in encryption. They can remove encryption. They can basically open up your network and just pick it apart and do whatever they want because they have access to the router, right? So it's pretty nasty stuff. Um,
Mm.
but there's a simple fix to that. Is just go to like WPA2 personal and set your security to that instead. Because the whole reason WPA2 exists, I believe, is just because WPA was unsecure, where WPA2 is a lot more secure. Um, and that's basically it. It's a simple setting that just change in your router, and it should be almost a seamless transition. Um, but if for whatever reason it's not, I'd still recommend taking the time to actually go over and change your network from WPA to WPA2 personal, or if you're working at a business, to be enterprise, just because it's safer, right? That you don't have people can just sitting there offline, undetectable, less, basically cracking the password to your network and ruining everything. And what I realized we forgot to do last episode
What?
was the most evil, or the worst sort of thing or hack, whatever.
But of course,
Yeah,
forgot to do
we
that.
we did it for backdoors in episode 1. We forgot social engineering episode 2. Um, that was a bit
So
of a
that
tricky
that
one.
includes types of social engineering and deception methods.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna say right here, right now, that I want to say that urgency is probably the worst one.
I don't know, man. I think social engineering as a whole is pretty bad.
Well, I mean, that's kind of unfair. It's like saying, oh yeah, I think the worst general malware is viruses.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well,
I'm telling you, it's urgency, right? Because a lot of people like they start to panic, and that's the whole point of it.
yeah,
Um,
no, of course. Yeah, I gotta agree with you there.
all right,
Um,
that was an easy one.
yeah.
Just gonna But
All right, so how about for this episode then?
oh,
What do you
so
think it was for this episode?
I want to say it's like botnets.
Botnets.
Botnets are the worst because not only that being part of a botnet can slow down your computer and your network, you can also, unbeknownst to you, contribute to taking down entire servers. That's why I want to say botnets are the worst. Now you can say
That's
whatever
fair.
you
That's
want, but I'm staying with botnets. I'm standing my ground on
yeah.
this one.
Like I kind of agree with you. Botnets are pretty dangerous. They're used to attack others, and they can also slow down your system.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it doesn't. They also don't really steal information from you. So
I mean, they can because if the hacker has access to your computer and they're connected to a network, they can just do whatever they want.
okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, yeah, then I've got to agree with botnet too.
Oh
Then.
man, bro, 2 for 2. Look at that. Like we got we're agreeing on everything today.
Oh yeah.
And I think we got one last episode, and we're gonna do our final showdown of the worst of the worst, which will be encompassing backdoors, urgency, as well as engineering tactics, botnets,
Well,
and
worst of the worst is a little deceptive, isn't it?
nah, I
I'd
mean
say it's
worst
more
worst
of
in
just
our
like
opinion.
the most effective.
Yeah, and then finally for application tax, we'll figure something out between stuff, which we'll cover that next episode. All right.
We'll do that with the showdown.
Yeah,
Perfect.
this has been today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I've been Rory, he's been Ethan, and we are out.